Okay. So I wanted to talk about enums because, while more intermediate level thing, they're common enough that we need them. Let's put it this way: they serve a super useful role within the health area. So the idea here is that often in our models we want to encode some sort of categorical information. So we want to have some way of denoting males and females. We want to have some way of denoting different provinces or different states. We want some way of denoting the fact that people are, either unemployed, employed, or retired, or what have you. And we can encode these things, these categories, using an integer. This is indeed, a classic way of doing it. Well, a classic way of doing it. So you encode sex with an integer. Now, we can do that, and we can encode province with an integer. But there's some problems here. There's some risks here. There's some dangers here. And much of building a model well is about being aware of the risks and avoiding them, trying to avoid them, taking steps to lessen them at least. And there's a couple dangers for having these as integers. One of the dangers is, for example, you might forget, or someone might misinterpret what's a 0, what's a 1. Is male 0 or is male 1? It's not immediately obvious, right? Same thing with province. Are you going from east to west or west to east? Are you sort of north-south? I mean, what have you? So there's some confusions. You see a 13 in US, well, what is that? Another thing is you might do something silly, like assign sex to be 2. And there's no protection against that. It's like unprotected sex. Here we're assigning an illegal value, but there's no protection for it. Province, similarly, we could do something silly like assign that to be sex, the value of sex, and it has no meaning. 1 here means something different than a province. We can assign it. We could do various silly things. We could make it -1. We don't know what it means. And so there's lack of transparency. There's issues of illegal values, confusions. There's no checking on our code that we've given it something legal. There's no guidance if we print it out. Print out the values. That won't be transparent. If we have it in our model, we see 0 or 1. We're in the model sex. We can't tell what it means.
So in case of sex or gender, we assign sex 2. Does it still run, or
Is it what?
Like if we assign the wrong, say,
Yeah.
as you said, it's like one of the incidents we assign the wrong digit
Right.
for say a subject or person.
Right.
Does it still run, or?
It may run, but they don't break, because at some point it may assume it's either 0 or 1, and it sees a 2 and it says, I don't know what to do, and it doesn't do something that it should do. Or even worse, if it does run, because there's an error there, it should handle it as either 0 or 1, it handles it as neither, and it just doesn't handle it at all.
So isn't it supposed to stop them running, like to give you an error message?
But it won't necessarily.
Like what if you used if 0
Yeah, exactly.
in
Do
if
the
statements? You
yeah.
could say if sex equals 0, do some condition, else do this other condition, then it will always be doing your else, and you might not catch it, right?
Right. Exactly. And what the person meant by 2 might have been what you would have called 1, but or what you would have called 0, and it goes to the wrong side of it. And so that issue of hidden errors is even worse than if it blows up. If it blows up, at least you know something's wrong. If it doesn't blow up, you don't know something's wrong until a year later you go back to answer reviewer questions, and you're getting ready, and you say, but that can't be right.
Or you think you've got a wicked behavior, and then you just got a mistake.
You've got a bug.
Can we assign like f to a type instead of number? Like if
You mean like a string?
Yeah, say male.
So you could, and that's a good question. So we could do something like assign a string, right? We could write out NL for Newfoundland Labrador, right? We could write out SK for Saskatchewan. We could put a string. The problem with a string is that that's also subject to if not ambiguity, at least to inconsistency. So sometimes people put lower SK, and you're checking in your code that it's upper SK, and you miss the fact, oh, they really meant upper SK. It doesn't force you into one of a set of values. And that inconsistency can lead to bugs. And believe me, this does. I mean, the reasons, how many people here have not had programs crash on them ever? Okay, one of the big reasons programs crash is these sort of stuff, this stupid little thing. I mean, it's a really simple little thing. People, one person uses this perfectly reasonable abbreviation, the other person assumes this other perfectly reasonable abbreviation, one assumes it's in uppercase, the other assumes it's in lowercase, they don't work together. Two perfectly reasonable assumptions lead to a crash. So what are enumerations? Enumerations help us avoid these sort of constants, these magic numbers. They let us give good names, common names, okay? These help also double check that we're not doing something silly like this. They help us make sure that we're entering one of the legal values, okay? So enums let us give names to information, refer to the names in our code, convert the names where necessary into values as specified, let us compare names and define operations on names, okay? So I'd like to show some examples here. So these are some examples. Here we're saying something called sex, capital S, it's a class, it's a class, and it must be either the value male or female. Here's enums, it can be one of these guys. If you try to pass the lowercase sk, it'll say, I don't know what that is. Go back and figure, okay, what has to be one of these? Nicely, it will print this out. If you actually have a person whose province is listed, their associate province, it'll put, ML as their province. Here, for their sex, it will put female. It will sort of be very obvious, it will print female, rather than just 0 or 1. And then, if you have a parameter, what would its type be? Its type would be sex, capital S. Or a parameter for their province, it would be capital P province. And if you tried to do this, it would say, I don't know what you're doing. It doesn't mean this.
So the order or the coding enum 6, or male, female, the computer always automatically assigns based on one for male or female.
So it's a great question. It's a great question. You're asking really good questions. So you by default will assign its own, but you can override that. So pretty sure I do so many different languages. I'm pretty sure in Java that you could say like male equals 0, female equals 1. If you want to ever convert them to a numeric value, it'll use your assignment. Okay. But the point is that in your code, where you want to say if this person's sex is female, then do this, otherwise do that, you actually refer to female. You don't refer to the value. But maybe there are some times where maybe you want to turn it into a number. But why? Because maybe you want to look it up into an array. It's either a position 0 or 1, or maybe because you want to output to a CSV file with only numbers. And in that case, you can assign your own number. Okay. Pretty sure about that. Okay, so here's some examples of enums in Java. So this is actually from ABM model with birth death. This model sort of exhibiting things. So here, okay. So what's the big disadvantage of enums in AnyLogic? The big disadvantage is that it's slightly messy in exactly the way you see here to put them, to introduce them. So in other words, here in the general, it's on advanced. It's in the advanced section. Let's go see where it is. So we're going to go to person here. We're going to go to person and go to advanced. And see this, So the problem is we have to put them here. There's not like a place we could drag enum. That's the big disadvantage. It's not a place you could drag enum. But you see there's enum sex here. That's probably the biggest disadvantage, that we have to put them here. We can't make them kind of more explicit. So that's the declaration of them. Now, where do we use them? Well, where do you think sex would be used? If we looked up here and we looked at some things, where would sex be used? Okay. Okay. So that's interesting. So there could be something, and there you go. If sex equals, okay. Now, what's this sex.female? It means this name female could be defined in other contexts too. So it's female with respect to the sex enum. So you do have to put the sex dot. That's the other kind of major sort of confusion. You have to say sex dot female, okay, rather than just female. But the other place they're used is in this parameter. So you have this parameter. Okay, that says person dot sex. In both cases, you could have said person dot sex. Yeah. Meaning sex, like as defined in this person. So that's the other confusing. Those are the three confusing things about this. So if you just got by, if you always, wherever you said female, you said person dot sex, so female, you'd be fine. Okay? Because it lives in person, and it's referring to the sex enum, and then say female. Here it's a person dot sex. Okay. So let's look at ethnicity. Where was ethnicity defined? Well, it was defined in this, ethnicity is here, First Nations, Métis, East Asian, South Asian. You notice I did these in so-called camel case, like I put several words together. I could put underbars between them. I like to put kind of just names one after the other there. You notice they have to be finished with a semicolon here. See that? And if I do that, then I can just go say, well, ethnicity is just person dot ethnicity is this sort of thing. It just lives in person, and that's sort of the ethnicity with respect to that. And then I can assign ethnicities or persons accordingly. So sort of the default value would be ethnicity dot Métis. Again, I could have said person dot ethnicity dot Métis to be even more consistent. Wherever you see ethnicity, you could always say person and just get yourself out of hot water. Person dot ethnicity. Just if you use that as a blanket rule, it should be fine with that. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Sorry, maybe it's not
sure.
Related, but populating these blanks or docking the colon or integer or double, is that like part of the Java interface? It's like it's a code too.
Say that again.
So like the person dot ethnicity in
type. Yeah. So this is
a code, or just
yes, it is actually Java code. It's basically it needs to know what sort of information this ethnicity thing contains, and you'd be tempted to say ethnicity, but for certain, I'm not even sure person dot ethnicity is used here. It's just if you're always careful on using this, you're gonna always be fine. And so I may have used this just to be very, very clear that it's ethnicity as defined in the person, and because that's where it's defined. You defined it in person. If you use that, you'll always be fine. Now, probably in this case, I could get by just saying ethnicity, and that would be fine too. But in some other cases, you will require person dot ethnicity, and I just think for my students, it's easier to just always think of it as person dot ethnicity. Yeah.
So would this almost kind of be like in math showing all your steps? So by always putting that person there, it's just a way of kind of documenting it almost for the next person, so that they know it lives in person?
That's true, but the real issue that it deals with is that occasionally, so you folks have
if we want this in name,
yeah.
Right?
Exactly. That is the key thing. So up in Maine, you'll go find in the statistics area, there's some things, for example, where we need to, maybe we want to count the number of First Nations people in our population. Okay? So what would we do here? In this statistics area, we might want to add a statistic, okay? And we want to compute the number of First Nations population, something like that. What do? We count the number of people who are First Nations. So suppose I could refer to a person in the population as item. Each successive person will be named item one at a time, and it will test some condition. What condition should I test? If I want to write a Java expression to see if they're a First Nations person, what would I test based on what we saw? Okay, we asked item.ethnicity. Item is a reference to that person, and we say item.ethnicity equals, and then what? Person.ethnicity.First Nations. Okay, and you notice it fills it in. You know, it knows that's one of the legitimate values. That's one of the nice benefits of this. It like knows what the legitimate values are, and you know can fill that in. In fact, if you had said even before dot, it would have said, okay, these are the choices: Caucasian, East Asian, First Nations, Métis, South Asian, and allows me to do that. So I'd say, okay, I count now the number of people who are First Nations people. Now, the deal here is that if I didn't refer to person, if I just said ethnicity, I don't know where to go. I don't know where it is. Where's ethnicity? You know, maybe it's defined in the experiment. You know, I don't see it there. You know, I don't know where it is. I give up, and it would give an error message. Okay, watch. If you think I'm distorting things, you know, I could say it says ethnicity cannot be resolved. That's why I tell my students, just put the person there. You'll save yourself trouble. Just as a habit, sort of a matter of hygiene, just always list this, and then you get out of this issue. You don't have to worry, oh, this code is being used there, and oh, we'll move it up to main, and then it doesn't work anymore. Just if you always list it, you're fine. So this would count now the number of people who are First Nations people in your population, and if we were to run this model, let's go run the model, and you can see some additional benefits of this. Okay, so okay.
So even if you're not dealing with enums,
Yeah.
should you still just include person or place where something is defined? If you're in the person class,
Oh.
you don't need to include it, should you? Or can you?
Well, only for certain types of things. In general, it's not needed to do that. This is the no UI simulation. Sorry. No, you don't have to in general. It's just for this sort of thing. An enum is sort of it's a different sort of thing than just like a parameter or that sort of stuff. So really, that's when you need to do it. So maybe I could just show you something here. Let's go look at a population member here, and let's just pause it for a second. So here's someone who's a Métis female, right? She's and you know, this is her age, etc. And this is all shown, you know, because it knows that's the name of that. So it just sort of makes it easier to understand. If I print it out, if I say like the baby's ethnicity is such and such, it will print out the right thing. You know, like just instead of printing 2 or 1, it'll print the actual ethnicity. So enums are a nice, consistent way of labeling choices between categorical choices.
You have the word public in front of it when you set them up. Does that make it available across classes, or does that mean something else?
Yeah, it means they're available across classes. It means other classes can know about them.
Yeah.
So like main could use them.
They're not private.
They're not things that only person can know about. They're things that main could refer to for this sort of stuff. So that's what I wanted to do. So when I define that statistic there, you know, I could have. So here's it running happily away, and somewhere in here is the population, and hey, don't put me there. Somewhere in here is the population, And you'll notice it says the First Nations population is 235, for example, 235 people. That was the result of that statistic that I just defined. It sort of counted up the number of First Nations people. And I think you'd probably agree that although that statistic had that unpleasantness with having to remember to put that person on ethnicity, especially if that's just a rule you reflexively follow, then this is probably clearer as to the meaning than if you said item.ethnicity equals 2 or something like that. It's just less room for error, less room for misunderstanding, and greater transparency. So these enums are more advanced. I'll tell you one story. I introduced these into the boot camp in Sydney, Australia, and the AnyLogic CEO took me aside and said, "Don't teach them something that advanced. That's way too advanced. That's advanced Java." And I agree. It's not beginning Java, but it's really useful, I think, and it's not that painful to use. Let me show you one other thing, though, that you will have to consider if you're using these, and that is if you're here with the population. One of the things we do in the population is assign values for parameters, and you'll notice I have this person.random age, person.random ethnicity, person.random sex. So that sort of chooses a random age for the person, a random ethnicity for the person, random sex. Now, I happen to define those things. I wanted to make it clear how it could be done cleanly, but I could have put the code in directly, but I want to show you what it looks like. Okay, this is what it looks like. I basically flip a coin, and I could have done this with uniform discrete between 0 and 1. If it's 0, make it sex.male, otherwise sex.female. But that's what I do. For the random ethnicity, it's actually, I could have done it that way, but what I say is I want a random value between 0 and the number of values of ethnicity, and then I'll just look up that. If it's 0, it'll be the first one. If it's 1, it'll be the second. If it's 2, it'll be the third.
The advantage of this would be then if you want to say you need to add
Exactly.
some ethnicity,
It automatically
you could
works.
without messing it.
Exactly. And this is key.
That's cool.
You are thinking, Sarah, like a software engineer now.
No.
That's exactly.
Maybe this
No,
is
but
working.
that happens all the time when
Yeah.
you're designing databases and everything. You've always got to leave room to add one because you never ever get it right. You always miss
Exactly.
something.
I can fit by this.
Exactly. And even the same thing, joking aside, even for sex, there might be a situation where you want to say sex.undefined
Yes.
or sex.
Sure.
Uncertain or whatever, and this would actually break
Yeah.
because it would say if we have 0, we'll only pick of those 2, and it wouldn't be picking on the third one. So this one is a little bit more, but it's and even this is, if I had put this in main, which might have been, it would have been cleaner to do. Put it in main, then this would have actually been much simpler. It would have said uniform discrete from 0 to this length minus 1, and then just look this up. So this is looking up, again, in that enum, if I is 0, it's the first element of the enum, 1 is the second. So that's how that works. So no big magic there. It's a little bit of pain, but I think it's well worth it. I mean, I just love models where I can just read off what the sex and ethnicity and not have to remember, the convention for coding it, and to know that I'm not just doing something silly like leaving it uninitialized and it has the value 0 by default, and I forgot to put a value there, and that's bitten me because 0 is a legitimate value. Like one thing you could do, Nasser was asking earlier, about this issue of does it automatically assign them numbers? If I want to assign them number, I could assign them the number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and leave 0 illegal. So if it started with a With a 0, I know that's not me who did it. You know, that must be some bug in the program or what have you. You know, or I could have an explicit illegal value as the first one and know that I'm never going to assign that and double check that it's not that or what have you. So the point is having only defined values there and making sure they're not creeping in other values. It's a useful thing. Anyway, that's Enums. So forgive me for presenting something more advanced, but I think it's a good thing.
I didn't see that.
No, but that sounds really useful.
Okay, well,
It's also nice if
It's
you're
like-
showing a model to somebody that they can just click on it and
Exactly.
see it. They don't have to ask you, what's a 5?
exactly.
Or that I can click on it and see it and not ask myself what's
No,
the
yeah,
font.
what was a 5 again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, if it's printed out, it has all those things in it. And yeah, I mean, I think this pays off in spades in
I
that
do
regard.
have one stupid question, because I think I know what it is, but I'm not sure, is the percentage sign.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
after the parameter,
That's a
is
that's a
was
great
that-
question.
It was percentage 2, so is that like between 0 and 1?
That's a great operator I should have talked about yesterday. I rarely use it, but occasionally it's useful. It's called a modulo operator, modulo. And so if you have some number modulo k, that's a number between 0 and k minus 1.
Okay.
Let me count up from 1 to 10.
Because we're always starting with 0, right? Or is
That's
that-
right, that's right. I'll count up from 1 to 10, a modulo 2, okay? Modulo 2, so this would be modulo 2. This would be 0, 1, 0, 1, 0,
okay.
1. It's kind of like the remainder if you divided this thing by that. So if you divided this thing by 2, it would go into it one time with a remainder of 1. Here it would go into it one time with a remainder of 0. Here it will go into a remainder twice with a remainder of 0. Here twice with a remainder of 1. So it's like the remainder. If I do it at modulo 3, does anyone want to help me? What would this be modulo 3? 0. This one? Okay. This one is 1 because it 3. Oh, sorry. This would be 3. 3 goes into this 0 times, and there's a remainder of 1 after
Oh, yeah,
that.
the remainder.
Right. How about this one here? 2 would be, modulo 3 would be, 2 modulo 3 is, how many times does 3 go into 2? 0 times. How many have left over?
2.
2.
Right, so it's 0, 1, 2, 0, 1.
Okay, how about this one? 3. It's actually 0. It goes into it one time, 0 is left over.
6 would be 0, 1, 2,
0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2.
Yeah, because 6 would be 0,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 6 is 0. 7 is 1. So it just goes 0, 1, 2. Just very regular form. How about 4? Let's try 4. Let's see if we can do 0, 1, 2, 3, 0. 1, 2, 3, 0. That's always the rule. Okay, I mean it just always goes from 0 to up to this minus 1, and then starts again, and starts again, and starts again, and that's what that modulo is. And that's, I rarely use it, but sometimes it's really useful. Sometimes it's really useful. It's like you pick a random number. In that case, it was because it gives me any integer it gives me back, and I need to turn it into something between 0 and 1. So if basically this is asking, is it even or odd? It's 0 if it's even, it's 1 if it's odd.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think that actually is what random and net level hides.
Ah.
Pretty sure, because that always bothered me when you said random 10 and you go to nothing.
Oh yeah.
So I think it's actually like, it's really interesting.
Oh, okay, that is interesting. Yeah. So maybe doing this modulo. Again, I mean, I think a lot of my students don't know what this means. like it's not really common. Some of my students in my undergrad courses, they've been using Java, but they don't know what it means because they don't see it enough. But yes, that's what it means, and it's useful to see. Okay, so that's all on types. I think I could start on methods, but any questions that I could address?
One thing I was thinking about
Yeah.
yesterday